Good evening. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. My name is Caitlin Patton. I'm the Executive Director of the National Music Festival and your host for this evening's edition of the Festival Forum. With me tonight is Tom Parchman, who has been the clarinet mentor for the National Music Festival ever since our very first season and serves as Director of Operations as well. Tom, welcome and thanks so much for joining us. You're muted. Try that again.
One more button here. Thank you for having me. I'm really glad to be here.
Great to see you. We have missed having you and all of the other mentors and all the apprentices in Chestertown this summer and last summer. It's been a very strange couple of years, well, year and a half, I guess, since COVID started. What has the pandemic been like for you musically? Were you able to keep playing and teaching throughout most of it?
Well, I tend to be fairly adaptable. When everything came crashing down, I actually kind of used that as an opportunity to do a couple of musical things that I didn't have the time to do. One of the problems I had is, having students I was teaching remotely, and they were also not on campus, is how do I keep them going? So one of the things I had to do was find a way of finding musical accompaniments for them to work with. Backing tracks, they're called. Now, singers do this all the time, especially pop stuff, but classical musicians have to work a little harder to make that happen. So one of the things I've done is I've become very efficient with backing tracks, to the point of actually making some of them, by going through several steps with scores, and identifying all the ones that exist that I can find. But the other thing is there's a few pieces of music that I don't get to play often, and I've been studying them with the backing tracks instead of just playing the clarinet part and studying the score.
Yeah.
So that's one of the things I've done that really has helped me keep going.
Yeah, that's neat. So we're going to talk about NMF, but before we do that, since I know my little friend here just popped her head up, this is Brooke. She's a foster who just arrived today, and my options were have her on my lap or everyone would hear her yelling in her crate. So Brooke is keeping us company, and you should know that you can't see her right now, but she's actually sitting here watching you very intently on the screen. So let's talk about the National Music Festival, and in particular, what exactly does a director of operations do?
Well, there's a long-winded answer that starts out, oversees all aspects of the festival, production, concerts, etc. But the truth of it um, is that I have to make sure that Richard can focus on making music, and that Caitlin can focus on raising money. And as long as I keep them both out of the weeds of the little things that go on, and they can stay focused on what they're doing, that's kind of my job. And this can manifest itself in a variety of ways. It might be, if I see that Caitlin is clearly bringing her a cup of coffee unannounced, or if I see that there's a personnel matter, for instance, that has to be resolved and really doesn't need to go to the music director. It just needs to be solved. I might just solve it somehow, without causing any kind of kerfluffle. It's one of those things that everything I do right, no one will notice. If I mess up, everybody gives me grief.
Yes, well, it certainly makes the festival run more smoothly from my perspective. And one of the other things that you do before the festival ever starts is to work on the schedule, the rehearsal schedule specifically, because Richard typically determines what the concert schedule will look like and, of course, what the programming will be. And then you get to take a stab at figuring out how we're going to rehearse a lot of music in a short period of time. And how do you even begin such a task?
Every morning I get up And one of the first things I do after looking at the New York Times is go to the section on games, and I do a Sudoku puzzle, one of the hard ones,
Uh-huh.
because that's kind of the way it works with the scheduling. If we had unlimited time and unlimited people, it'd be rather simple, but we have neither. So it becomes the kind of thing like, okay, if this rehearsal needs 3 trumpets and this rehearsal needs 2 trumpets and we only have 4 trumpets, how do we make this work so that we get people in both places at the same time? So it's a resource issue and it's a people resource issue. It's also an equipment issue. If something needs 4 timpani in one place and 4 timpani in another, we only have 4, how do we make that kind of go back and forth? And the other thing is, usually I do it 4 or 5 times totally.
Yeah.
Knowing full well that the first 4 times probably won't stick because something will change. Something will happen, a piece will change, a venue isn't available, so we have to switch venues, which means we have to switch the times.
Right.
So it's really like a puzzle. And it's a dynamic puzzle where you're working and it's something, a number changes as you work.
Right, and it changes even after the festival has begun. As one of the things that you do during the festival is send out daily emails with the schedule, because it does change. A group might decide they need more rehearsal, or less likely, less rehearsal.
Well, I mean, there's some, I think about some of the brass groups, who I schedule time for, but they tell me, hey, we don't really need 6 hours, 4 hours is enough.
Yeah.
But we need it on 3 different days or something like that. Sometimes I get surprised. I study the scores before I start to begin to get an idea of how difficult the music is. Well, one of the pieces we did several years ago was the Frankenstein piece.
Yeah.
The Gruber, and I did not have a score to study. So that's one where, as I got closer and saw a score, I went, oh my goodness, this is far more complicated than I thought. This is going to take much more time. So things like that, because sometimes we do a newer piece or a piece I don't know, and my initial assessment is not correct. Or a conductor tells me my initial assessment is not correct and I need to adjust to give them more time to rehearse a group.
Yeah, and then we have, of course, as the festival progresses, we have groups who want to put something together for our potpourri concerts, which probably those of you listening have probably attended potpourri concerts, but for anyone who's not familiar, that is the one night that we do not program in advance. Where the musicians at the festival can put together their own ensembles, rehearse whatever they would like, and it's really a fun variety of music that we end up putting on those concerts. But those are impromptu groups that can't be scheduled in advance, that you then have to fit into the schedule somewhere, and we have to find venues for, and so forth.
And we also have to audition them to see if they're appropriate for the programs we're doing. And that's a case where if there are 20 groups, I might go through the 20 and say, Richard, I think these are the 6 or 7 really strongest ones, and here are the next group, and here's what I heard, so that you can spend less time making your assessment. In other words, that's the kind of thing where I'm talking about keeping the music director focused on what they do. If there's some legwork that I can do first, I'll do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
If we need paper for the copy machine, I'll go get it. So, whatever.
So with the knowledge that things change a lot during the festival, what does a typical day at NMF look like for you?
The typical day. Well, I don't know if there are any of them are really typical.
Perhaps that's the wrong word.
Typically, I will get up and get myself to the first rehearsal site to be sure what we need is there. Typically in an orchestra, there's an operations person you've got someone doing personnel and you have someone doing stage management.
Right.
And depending on how we're structured, I may end up doing all three or none of the above, depending on who's actually there. But before rehearsal starts, here's one of the things I want to make the music director able to walk in and rehearse and not have any whatevers. And there are always questions, and I try to take them and get the right answer here again, so Richard and Caitlin can focus on their primary responsibilities, not is the room have enough light, is the air conditioning on, is the right, if someone's not there, I've got to go find them. Third trumpet, I recognize that you stayed up last night playing video games all night, but that doesn't matter. You need to show up right now and play the third trumpet part. Or, oh, the rehearsal's at 10, I thought it was at 11.
Yes.
Or, oh, wow, I was supposed to bring my music and I left it in, Middleton, Middlebury, whatever the middle town is there. I can't remember right now. I'm going blank.
Middletown. Yeah.
Middletown. Okay, so it's that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But that'd be the first thing. Get the rehearsal started, where I know it's started, and typically there'll be at least one apprentice there with the rehearsal in case something blows up. And I don't mean physically, I mean just otherwise. And then I will try to look at the things I need to get done, including my own personal preparation for whatever I'm playing, and get that done. Check in on the rehearsal at the end to be sure everything went well. We start worrying about the different places that we rehearse. So typically I've got to go around to the various sites to be sure things are unlocked, be sure people have gotten in to rehearse, that kind of thing. Yeah. And that could be, driving to Rock Hall. That could be a variety of things. I'm trying to make sure that the wheels stay well lubricated and turn, as they need to.
Right. Well, also, as you said, preparing the music that you're playing and, some days having rehearsals and performances of your own.
Right.
So we are grateful that you are good at multitasking.
Yes, it's definitely a multitasking job. No doubt.
Yeah. We have two musical excerpts to share this evening. We're going to listen to the first one now. This is a piece by Felix Mendelssohn. This is from June 7th of 2018, from the 2018 season of the National Music Festival. And as this is a piece that you played with Gary Smart, who was the piano mentor that year and one of your apprentices. And as I recall, this is a piece for clarinet, piano, and basset horn. So
that's correct.
Let's listen, and then maybe you can tell us a little bit about this, and in particular, answer the question of what exactly is a basset horn. But let's hear it first. This will take me just a second to pull up the video, because no matter how often I do this, I always momentarily forget how it's done. All right, here we go. So I let that run all the way through the applause and the bows so that we could see your instrument, because the angle of that particular video didn't show very well while you were actually playing what a basset horn looks like. So what exactly is a basset horn?
I was just thinking, when I was in grad school, taking a course in classical music history with everybody else, the professor slipped in a question, that same question. After a page and a half, of answer, I got a note back on the exam, a thank you. So a basset horn. What makes the basset horn different is that the length of the instrument versus the size of the bore is different from a regular clarinet. It's a small bore instrument that's very long. And what that makes is an instrument that has a very dark sound that blends well with voice, and it doesn't sound like the other clarinets at all because of that relationship. It's probably a smaller bore than a clarinet, but almost twice as long.
Mm-hmm.
Mozart used it at his best advantage with voices, so that you find it in his operas, Magic Flute, the Clemenza de Tito, which was one of his last operas, where he used it quite a bit. But it's a unique clarinet sound. And the other time I played basset horn was when we did the Mozart Requiem, where it started off with basically basset horns.
Yeah. Is it more difficult to play than a regular clarinet?
It's very different to play.
Mm-hmm.
It's in the key of F, which is unusual key for a clarinet. So you have to adjust your hearing not to hear in B flat or A, but in F. And that's one of the challenges. Yeah. For some reason, I've played basset horn a lot. I don't know why, but it just worked out that way. But this piece, this Berman piece, I was going to mention that, it's, I say Berman, it's Mendelssohn, but it was written for Heinrich Berman and his brother Carl, son Carl. And it was basically, Berman had a dish that he was going to make, and the deal was, come over, show me, Mendelssohn, how to make this dish, and I will write you a piece.
That's great.
So, I mean, like over in the kitchen cooking thing, I don't remember what it was. It was some German specialty that Berman had. So this piece was written in that kind of relationship. They're friends. It was a trade for learning how to cook something, and then the three of them performed it.
Wow.
So this a lot of music has a story. Like, it wasn't just written because they, to write a piece. This was written for friends and performed by friends.
What a wonderful little bit of history there. I should also, I just wanted to mention, I was reminded in watching that video, that performance was at Sacred Heart Church on High Street in Chestertown. And the piano belongs to Liz Gross, who's been on our board for a number of years and is present here on Zoom with us tonight. So thank you, Liz, for allowing us to
use. Thank you, Liz. I had thought about that was your piano when I saw it.
Yeah. So I think this is a good segue into, I'm actually taking my questions slightly out of order. But one of the things that I wanted to ask you is whether you play any instruments other than the clarinet. And so in addition to, I guess I would include here all the different types of clarinets, if you want to give us a quick overview of the various types of clarinets. But the question also stands for, for any other instruments that are not clarinet related that you might play or have played.
Well, I do play all of the clarinets, which starts off with the small one, which is E flat, C, B flat, A, which are the standard orchestra ones, bass clarinet, contralto, and contrabass clarinet. Although I have to say, it's been a long time since I've had a contralto in my hand. And contrabass is kind of rare too, but there is a Carliano symphony that has a piece that has a big contra part in it. because it was written for John Ye of the Chicago Symphony. You play the contrabass, then you play an E-flat clarinet solo. It was made the largest and the smallest
Yeah.
because it was for John Ye, who can do those kinds of things. But in, you know, reminded, I've got a picture I put somewhere of me playing the saxophone. I put it up with a note that I'm a gentleman, I own saxophones and try not to play them in public. But I played the saxophone since the 8th grade. I played, classical saxophone. This spring we had a pops concert here in the Portland Symphony, which was one of those where we had no audience. It was video only, separated by distance and plexiglass. And because of the circumstances, they needed someone to play Barry sax, and I went, well, I can do that. That's, I've done it before. But it was like one of those moments where my colleagues hadn't seen me do it on stage, so they were quite surprised. I've played saxophone in the festival. What was it, American in Paris, that we did a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
And I think there must have been something else. Maybe I can't remember if we've done Bolero or not, but I do play saxophone. I play flute badly, and try to avoid the double reeds because of a lack of patience and money to make reeds.
Fair enough. So how did you start playing the clarinet, and when did you start playing the clarinet, and how did you choose clarinet as your instrument?
Well, I started clarinet in the 5th grade in public school. I had severe asthma as a child, allergies, and the doctor had recommended, I think my mother had read somewhere, that playing a wind instrument could help with asthma. So I know that one of my neighbors at the time was in high school and played the clarinet. And of course, this was at a time when air conditioning was optional and the windows were open. So as somebody, I heard her play. So I'm like, okay, I'll play the clarinet. And that's how I started.
Yeah.
Yep.
Little did you know how much.
You're right. And yesterday I played 6 hours of Elixir of Love by Donizetti opera. It's our first getting back together in normal, spacing and with an audience.
That's exciting.
It is.
Yeah. Yeah. So then how did you know, or when and how did you know that you wanted to pursue music as a profession? And not just as something you did in school, but as something more serious. So what did that path look like for you?
Well, I mean, I came to that conclusion certainly as a senior in high school, and at that time I was thinking music ed. I was a music education major at Southern Methodist until my last semester, where I switched to a double major in performance. So I was going up through that particular path. I think as a senior in college, I came to the conclusion I wanted to try to go towards performing rather than teaching the public schools.
Yeah.
So I, went to Northwestern and then got a job in an orchestra in Mexico for 3.5 years, playing music every week.
Right.
And it was Strauss, Wagner, Mahler. It was not popular music at all.
What was that like, performing in Mexico during those years? I mean, were you touring around the country, or were you settled in one part of the country?
When I got there, well, my first day, everything was late, as you might expect. So instead of arriving at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, I got in like 1 a.m., had to go to a hotel, and then got up, and I knew there was a rehearsal on Monday at 10 o'clock. And I walk in, and there was no onboarding, nothing. The conductor walks up to the podium, and of course, I know no Spanish at this point, none. And he says one word, till. as in Till Eulenspiegel,
Right.
because that was one of the tour pieces.
Mhm.
So he drops the stick and we start rehearsing. And of course, they haven't had a bass clarinetist there. So I'm going, okay, the first really big entrance here is this really low note, and I'm going to play it really loud to let them know I'm here. So, and then that was Monday. On Wednesday, we left on tour,
Uh-huh.
for a 3-week tour, which had Till, the Franck D minor symphony, Chai Sticks, Rosenkavalier.
Mhm.
And at that point, there have been several Americans and come to the orchestra. There were 2 Mexican gentlemen also playing. So at one point in the tour, the new co-principal was going to play Tchaikovsky, so I played second, and we both had to read it without a rehearsal, which was interesting, but
Exciting. Yeah.
exciting. Yes, right. Very focused, very focused.
Yes.
But no, we were 3 weeks on the road, and a lot of the places that we went are places now that you would not go because of the drug trade.
Mhm.
At that time, it was very safe. It was really not a problem.
Yeah. And I'm guessing you learned Spanish fairly quickly at that point.
I was never very good at it, but I improved quickly. It was like a matter of how do you eat? Well, let's see. Let's see if I can learn the food words first, but the people were always very tolerant of my mistakes
Mhm.
in Spanish, and as a group, they were very gracious to me. So I mean, I have no problems with citizens of Mexico
Mhm.
at all.
Yeah. And then what did you do when you came back to the US?
I went to Los Angeles. I realized I'd been there long enough that I needed to do something to continue improving. So the choice was, do you go to New York or do you go to LA? And I decided LA, because of one of the teachers there, Mitchell Lurie, was very famous, for years and years, principal in Chicago, and then moved back to LA because his family didn't like the weather in Chicago. Can't imagine that. And I got a scholarship, a TA-ship, actually, with the contemporary music ensemble.
Uh-huh.
I got into Long Beach Symphony, which had an opening at the time, and worked on my doctorate and played professionally.
Yeah.
And then at the end of my doctorate, there was a job opening in Portland, Maine, which was a joint position between the university and the orchestra, which later I figured out they both thought they had me full time, but beside the point, But that's how I ended up in Portland, and that's where I've been since.
That's quite an adjustment from LA to Portland, Maine.
They gave me a hard time that first year. I nearly froze to death.
Yeah.
There was rehearsals where I had like a coat over my shoulder and a hood over, and I'm playing like. My first concert was an outdoor concert in early September. It was about 50 degrees with about a 30-knot wind off the ocean, and there was a tent pole right in front of me, and the wind would hit it and raise the pole about a foot and bring it down. I'm sitting there going, what have you done? But yeah, there was quite an adjustment.
Yeah,
Yes.
I can only imagine.
But I survived.
Yeah, so you teach at the University of Southern Maine. And you're teaching clarinet students, but also some like classroom courses, right? Um,
I have 2 courses in the fall. One is basically American popular music. I
uh-huh,
mean, we call it something else because it's got some world music things thrown in, and a course on anti-Semitism in music.
uh-huh.
What is it? Devils, Dragons. I'm gonna blank here. That's that's basically traces music and anti-Semitism and where it shows up,
Right.
where the things cross.
Yeah. Interesting.
And lately, it's been a very timely set of discussions because the whole idea of an other group that's being discriminated against translates so well into current events.
Right. Yes. Unfortunately timely.
Unfortunately, timely.
Yeah. So one other quick question, and then we'll hear another a piece of music. But so in addition, I know that you keep very busy. So you're teaching
Mhm.
at the university, you're playing with the Portland Symphony. Obviously, you're working with NMF, but you do some other playing around Portland as well, as I recall.
Well, I play in the Rhode Island Phil,
That's right.
which is, and in Portland, I'm playing in the Opera Maine,
Hmm.
which is, like I said, getting back. We had Dutchman scheduled for last year and couldn't do it. This year we scheduled a small opera, Donizetti Elixir of Love, with a 15-piece orchestra and a small, like an 8-person chorus. It's all very small, but we thought, okay, no matter what happens, this will work. We can make this go, even if we have people standing 10 feet apart.
Yeah.
But I do that. I was just up at the Madomic Conductors Retreat.
Hmm.
I contract an orchestra for Ken Kiesler's group. Let's see, what else is going on here right now? Odds and ends. I was working on my courses in the fall, for the fall today a little bit. Plan ahead.
Yeah. So there's never a dull moment. You keep very busy.
That's true. That's true. I wish there were a few more dull moments.
Yeah, and you were also for quite some time, quite a number of years, you worked with the Spoleto Festival in Charleston, South Carolina, which is where we met. For those who don't know, Tom was my boss. In 2006, I was an apprentice in orchestra management at Spoleto, and then returned in 2007 as an orchestra manager. So I guess I must have done okay since you let me come back.
Well, I mean, and I have to point out that it's no small sense of mirth and glee for Caitlin to know that she's now my boss.
I cannot deny that. It's true. It does give me some entertainment value.
No, I participated in the Spoleto Festival for actually 25 years. Um, there was a period of time I was working in the Italian Festival, and then a period of time I was working in the Charleston Festival as the orchestra manager.
Mhm.
Now I've gone on to bigger and better things like the NMF.
Exactly. So on that note, let's hear some more music. This is a recording from 2015 from the swing night that we did that season. This is the riffs from the Prelude, Fugue, and Riffs by Leonard Bernstein, with Tom as the soloist. So enjoy this excerpt. Well, that's great fun.
Yeah, there are four really big concertos for the clarinet that Benny Goodman had a lot of influence on making happen, that he recorded. The recordings, Meeting at the Summit, and the Bernstein was one, the Copland is another, Morton Gould Derivations, and the Stravinsky Ebony Concerto. And I've been able to do three of the four of them. I've never done the Stravinsky. That takes a very specialized group of people in the background, and that's why no one else does it either. It's really hard to get the right group together.
Yeah.
But the Bernstein's a great piece, a lot of fun.
Yes, absolutely. So we're going to wrap up here shortly. But I wanted to ask you, before we do, I wanted to ask you a little bit about more of the musical side of your time at NMF, because we talked quite a bit about the director of operations side, but let's talk a little bit more about the mentor side of what you do for the National Music Festival. What is it like working with the apprentices? I mean, how does that work from day to day during the festival?
It's just like any of the teaching I do at the university here. It really varies a lot by the situation of the student, and it's not necessarily just the clarinet players.
Yeah.
One of the pieces I did, the Benny at 100 Pico de Rivera piece a few years back, and the accompanist, the young woman had just finished her master's at a British school, was playing. She's a wonderful player, but I sent along a message saying, now whoever plays this needs to understand the concept of boogie woogie. And I guess that it was taken as a joke, but the whole thing is kind of a boogie woogie, which means you don't read the rhythms precisely. You apply a jazz boogie woogie feel. So we got to the point where the boogie woogie started. I started doing this stuff, and I hear the pianist stop, and I look at her, and it's like I'd grown a third eye on my forehead or something. And it's like, suddenly, what are you doing? This is boogie woogie. It's not straight. But so sometimes it's that kind of influence. Like, okay, this is something you haven't heard, but this is how this kind of works. But coaching some of the groups, a lot of the clarinet students that I get are already very well trained.
Yeah.
So the things that I say to them are more on sitting in the audience and saying, what that worked really well, except the person next to you didn't follow you. We need to get them to do what you're doing. Or, I can't quite hear what you're doing. It's not overt enough in this, in this setting. Or, you guys sound great. Keep doing the same thing. But it's some of the students want more specific instruction. A lot of them want a chance just to play.
Yeah.
And part of the thing I have to figure out quickly is which thing do they need? From preparation for auditions, or how to better execute a piece that they're performing. That problem. By the time we get to the festival, unless it's something brand new, it's something that I probably got a score for and I've studied in preparation for the festival. So I know something beforehand. I also try to, we do this so that the students know what their responsibilities are when they get to the festival, so they have a chance to prepare beforehand. That allows them to come ready to play. And because the festival has a really grueling schedule, so that we don't overtax them so some gets physically hurt.
Right.
So all of those things kind of go together. But the students, coaching them, it's just depends. Sometimes, I've also had to referee, which is something when you put people together in groups. Sometimes you get someone that leads, and sometimes everybody's trying to be respectful, but there's still a musical situation that has to be resolved.
Yeah.
We're going to play it at this speed, or we're going to make this quiet here and loud here, or we're going to make the phrase in this shape. And sometimes you have to find a way to get them to do that, agree to do that. And sometimes it's tell them, sometimes it's a suggestion, sometimes it gets them to experiment. It depends on the group, it
Mhm.
depends on the students.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm curious about how you assign who's going to play what, because before we get to you obviously have to do that before the festival so they know what they're playing, so they, as you said, they can prepare. um but until we get to the festival, unless you have a student who you know from elsewhere or who is returning to NMF, which does happen, but other than
Mhm.
that, these are students that you don't know. You've seen their applications, you've heard them play, in a recorded setting in their applications, but how do you go about deciding who's going to play what?
Well, one of the things I do is say, well, what would you like to play?
Hmm.
What are the pieces you really wanted to play, knowing that we're going to rotate this so that everybody gets to play something. So it's depending on the piece, maybe everybody wants to play the first clarinet part, Chai 4 or something. I don't know, pick something. Um, so I have to sort of figure out the pieces. Um, Usually it works out. People will come and say, there are a couple of pieces I really wanted to play.
Hmm.
Um, and it's a matter of balance. Because when I assign them, I'm also assigning thinking about this being tired,
Hmm.
because I don't want anyone to be overtired in a performance because they will not play as well. And I don't want anyone to get physically hurt,
Yeah.
because this is in something like this. There's so much rehearsal that is a real danger, but it has normally worked out. If I can't give somebody something they really wanted, if I'm careful, I can find something else that maybe they don't know as well, but actually is a really nice piece to play.
Mhm.
Um, it hasn't really been a problem. Most of the time, people's preferences are um, something I can make happen.
Yeah, that's great.
And then if it's something really strange, I may play it.
Yeah.
If it's something odd, an odd thing that I know it's odd, that I know what's going to happen, if I don't have someone that I think is really strong enough, let's say, especially on E flat clarinet or bass clarinet,
Hmm.
I'm not going to put any student in a place where they can't excel.
Hmm. Yeah.
Um, so it does kind of depend um, on what we're doing, and how much rehearsal time there'll be and things like that.
Hmm. Yeah, you mentioned Frankenstein earlier, and I think you played on that.
Yeah.
It was one of
When I
the
figured out what it was, yeah, I
yeah.
did. Because I knew it was that we did not have as much rehearsal as the conductor wanted. I knew it was odd. And I sort of talked some of my colleagues, mentors, into playing also, so that we had an experienced group to be receptive to the challenges, playing, slide whistle and things like that.
Right. For those who don't know the piece, everyone, in addition to their real instruments, everyone plays toy instruments as well. So it's great fun.
And yeah, initially when I thought toy instrument was like, a ratchet or something. Oh no, here's an instrument that I not only have to slide whistle, but I have to play the right pitches. Um, and we were sitting there practicing scales on slide whistle. It was very humbling.
Well, sometimes it's a good experience to go back to being something like a beginner and remembering what that was like.
Right. Well, we were definitely beginners, and we're all looking at each other like, oh man, here we are in F minor, right? We're not like in an easy key either,
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. Well, it has
No,
been, oh, sorry, go ahead.
no, I was just say, but I do try to make sure my students are challenged, but I don't want to put them in something that I think there's going to be a problem.
Yeah. Right. We want everyone who comes to NMF to have a successful experience.
Right.
One
Exactly.
that builds on the skills they already have and helps them grow as musicians.
Right.
Yeah. Well, it has been a great pleasure talking with you. Well, we're going to wrap up in a moment, but I just wanted to ask first if there's anything else that you wanted to talk about or wanted to say before we do.
Well, I have to say, I'm looking forward to being back in Chestertown. Um, I'm tired of the plague that befalls us, and I'm ready to move on.
Yeah.
And I'm sure all of you are ready to do things too.
Yes.
We can simply avoid Delta variants and anything else. Let's look forward and have another festival here in June, and you know it'll be a late 10th festival, I believe, but we'll still celebrate it like it was.
Absolutely. And Richard has some great plans already for June of 2022. The festival will be June 5th through the 18th, 2022. So everyone mark your calendars. We're very excited about it. Already hard at work on the 2022 season and putting some things in place for the 2023 season as well.
All right.
We are very much looking forward to having you back in Chestertown and being able to, have a normal festival again. Can't wait until next June. Thanks so much for being a part of our festival forum series. It was great to see you, great to talk with you.
Absolutely. It was great to be here. Thank you.
Yes. Well, thank you for spending the evening with us. And thanks to everyone who tuned in to listen as well. Appreciate you spending your evening with us. Thanks again and have a good night.